A woman's fight for death with dignity, another gaffe for Vice President Joe Biden, and tracing the bacon boom. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds. Camera one. Talent.
Ready, camera two.
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we run down some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields. And here in studio, we're joined by stand-up comic Stephen Cruiser. Now it's time to get to the top of the rundown. And Michelle's up first.
At the top of my rundown, an emotional story about a 29-year-old newlywed who moved from San Francisco to Oregon. Brittany Maynard was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. She was diagnosed on January 1st of this year after she complained of migraines. Doctors said she would survive about a few months. Brittany, however, wanted to die on her own terms. She is campaigning for death with dignity laws, which currently exist in 5 states. This allows people to have the option to end their life on their own terms. Brittany plans to take a pill her doctors gave her that will let her die without any pain. That will happen on November 1st. It wasn't an easy decision, but she made a video for an online campaign organized by Compassion and Choices. Take a listen.
I can't even tell you the amount of relief that it provides me to know that I don't have to die the way that it's been described to me that my brain tumor would take me on its own.
Death with dignity allows for people who are in the predicament of facing a lot of suffering that they can decide when enough is enough.
Obviously, this is very controversial, and many people are saying that no, she shouldn't be able to take this pill, and others are saying she should die with dignity, she should be allowed to do that. What do you say, John?
Well, I've had relatives that have had terminal illnesses, and it's horrible and dehumanizing to go to the hospital day after day and watch them literally waste away to nothing. It's happened in my case to older people. When I was growing up, my best friend had a very aggressive form of leukemia, and he died at the age of 5 or 6. And those images of him in the hospital bed and the skin and bones, the skeleton that was just left there by this horrible disease is just burned into my brain. I'll never forget it. So I'm very sympathetic to those who don't want to go out on those terms, those who want to say, all right, I want to go out when I'm lucid, I want to go out when I look like myself, I want to go out without making my family come to the hospital room and see me suffer like this. So I'm very sympathetic to them.
It is very complex. A lot of people like to say, well, it's an individual choice. Well, it's not really once you're bringing in a doctor and involving medical personnel who may have moral objections to these kinds of things too. But it's interesting that we have this story today because today is my Uncle Pete's, would have been my Uncle Pete's 80th birthday. And he was a tough individual who, towards the end of his life, he had MRSA, leukemia, and a failing kidney. He couldn't get the kidney transplant because then they found out about the leukemia. He's on dialysis, he's all the kinds of things that a rough, independent guy does not want to do. So he finally just called the family in one day and said, I'm done. Now, he wasn't actively participating in it because it was sort of, because they knew once he went off the dialysis, it wasn't going to last long, obviously. So all I can think about now is the way he went out. It was right before Memorial Day. The family had a big party because we're Irish. People are dying, you drink. They had a huge party, and everybody knew he was going to be dead within the week. But that's the way he wanted to go out. Everything on his terms across the board. And it was, I mean, it was emotional and wrenching for all of us. It was kind of cool that he went out on his own terms like that. So, you know, people should be able to do what they want, but there's so many moral implications, especially for religious people when it comes to things like this. That's what makes it muddy.
And Michelle, you know, there's something very unique about the American experience that has changed over the last few years. The Wall Street Journal actually did a big piece on this not too long ago. Most Americans, up until fairly recently, used to die at home. And when you die at home and you have your family around you and you're in your own bed and you use your own bathroom and you eat your own home cooking, it's a very different experience than dying in the hospital, which is where most of us die now, hospitals or hospice care. And it's jarring for people to leave their home, to leave where their comfort zone, and go to a place that's sterile, go to a place that they don't want to be, and die there. So I think that also plays a huge factor in these decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to be comfortable. When you're at that point, you've probably gone through so many surgeries, so much medication that you just want to be with your family in a comfortable space that you recognize and just be at peace, not in a hospital where you're hearing noises and it's sterile, like you said. So I understand.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have for us?
The shift in tone right now, sort of, at the top of my rundown, where there's a Biden, there's a Gaffe. The vice president is on damage control once again after he suggested that Saudi Arabia backed al-Qaeda or other extremist groups in Syria. Biden said Turkey allowed foreign fighters to cross into Syria, while Turkey, the United Emirates, and Saudi Arabia provided weapons and aid to Syrian rebels, and that ended up in the hands of al-Qaeda and other extremists. Take a listen to what Crazy Joe the Wonder Veep said that got him into trouble.
They poured hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad, except that the people who were being supplied were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and the extremist elements of jihadis coming from other parts of the world.
Biden later apologized to the United Arab Emirates on Sunday. Now, there are two tales going on here. One is the obvious media bias angle here, because if, we're still talking 8 years later about something that Sarah Palin didn't say, but that Tina Fey said she said on Saturday Night Live. This guy is a walking gaffe machine. And what a lot of people, and he gets a free pass. They keep reporting on this stuff, but they keep making it seem like, oh, well, it's just a little misstep. And he said, but this is the fourth one of these in a week and a half, I think, for the vice president right now. And what a lot of people don't know is he's heavily involved in our Iraqi policy. He's not just some figurehead over there. The president keeps him involved in this, keeps him in the loop on this. He should know better than this, but he keeps getting a free pass. And the other part, the part that infuriates me, and I don't know if you're one of these people, but people on our side find him amusing. They just think it's amusing. So it's not just the media. It's people who should be holding him accountable who don't hold him accountable.
Well, first thing is, if Hillary Clinton decides not to run, this is their establishment candidate.
Yeah.
So this is what we're up against next time around, unless something really unexpected happens. I had our mutual friend Kurt Schlichter on the radio program yesterday talking about this, and I thought he had an interesting take. He said with Joe Biden gaffes, it's funny because he gets in more trouble for saying the truth than he does for saying a lie. And the fact of the matter is that Saudi Arabia is playing both sides. Mm-hmm. And Turkey is playing both sides, and the United Arab Emirates is playing both sides, because they have fanatical people living in those countries that hate our guts. The government is supportive of what the American government is doing and what the American military is doing, but their constituents aren't, their subjects aren't. So I think there is an element of truth to what Joe Biden had to say, but it's something that you just can't say. It's like everybody knows that Islam is not a religion of peace. Yes. But George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, they all have to go with that meme because they don't want to start a war or start another world war with the Middle East by telling the truth. So it's just one of these things where all American politicians are expected to say something that we all know is not true just to keep the peace. Joe Biden didn't.
And he should know better than that, because the only thing he's ever done in his life is be a politician. I mean,
that's true.
Michelle, do you remember what he did before he got in the United States? You weren't even born when Joe Biden got into the United States Senate. Shouldn't he know better by now? And what's the excuse for him not? How does he keep getting away with it? Is it just media, or is it just media bias, or is it because people are uninformed?
I do think there is a little bit of bias. Every time he does say something kind of silly, it's, oh, that's just old Joe Biden, no big deal. But if it's a female Republican, it's, well, she's a ditz, she's an idiot, she's uneducated. So there is sort of a partisan bias, I would say. And also, what Biden said is absolutely true. I would absolutely agree with him. But the difference is I'm not the vice president. And when you are a diplomat, when you are someone who is supposed to represent the United States, you don't say those things. These are allies. We don't want to tick them off. And that's exactly what he did. And if he's really thinking of 2016, and if he has supporters, I don't know if he does, or donors that are looking into him, this is a clear example of why Joe Biden would be a terrible, terrible president.
Or the best thing that ever happened to us. But, at least he's not some crazy Republican broad out there saying that Vladimir Putin's going to invade Ukraine.
You know what? Be careful what you wish for, though. Sometimes, you know, the Democrats in 1980 were hoping for Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
And they got him, and he beat him like a drum. All right, time to move to the top of my rundown, where former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta is speaking out about President Obama's foreign policy. Panetta criticized Obama for not listening to warnings on leaving troops in Iraq and arming the Syrian rebels. He added that Fallujah should have been a wake-up call for the Obama administration. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
But last January, the black flags of ISIS were raised over Fallujah, where we lost so many troops. That, last January, had to be a wake-up call to the White House.
Yeah, there's no question. Once Fallujah fell, a town where we had really gone to war to try to get that town back under Iraqi control, and lost a lot of lives as a result of that. Once Fallujah fell, that should have been a wake-up call that we were not just dealing with a bunch of, rabble-rousers. We were dealing with a very sophisticated terrorist operation that was conducting a war on the ground that effectively was gaining territory, and that it was only a matter of time that if they could take Fallujah, there is no reason why they shouldn't be able to take Baghdad. Fallujah should have been a big wake-up call.
You know, Cruiser, every administration has one Judas. They have one member that goes out and writes a book that's extremely critical of what goes on. George W. Bush had Scott McClellan, the former press secretary. Bill Clinton had Dick Morris. Dick Nixon had John Dean. Mm-hmm. This administration has seen more people, particularly in the realm of foreign policy, leave and come out with books questioning not their ideology, but their competence, their ability to run the government. It's not just Leon Panetta that's come out and said this. Bob Gates, the former defense secretary, did the same thing in a book that he wrote. Mm-hmm. And Hillary Clinton, when she wrote her book, was extremely critical of the administration on the issue of foreign policy. Are you surprised to see so many people come out and say that these people are bad at their job?
I'm not surprised with Panetta at all, because what you're seeing now is the formidable Clinton media machine whirring into motion and gearing up for 2016. This is all advanced gaming for Hillary. You're going to provide cover for her. He's going to end up saying, oh, Hillary was one of the ones with us, because he was talking about a group of us when he first in this book about who were cautioning the president to not withdraw from Iraq too early. So that's what you're seeing there. Dana Milbank at the Washington Post is very upset about this, by the way. He first tweeted about it on Monday, and then he ended up writing a full op-ed later in the day calling this stunning disloyalty from Panetta, and musing as he couldn't understand why the president couldn't inspire more loyalty, and then he defaulted to, well, maybe he's just too cerebral for everyone. But we're seeing, and it's quite the opposite. He's an incompetent, paste-eating moron when it comes to foreign policy, and that's why so many people are talking about it now. And these are people that don't owe any loyalty to him. Gates didn't. Gates was a holdover. Panetta's a Clinton guy originally. Hillary obviously has her own agenda. So no, there's going to be a never-ending trail of people like this, because he does not know how to connect with people.
Michelle, talk to me about the politics of this, because right now the Republicans have a double-digit lead over Democrats on the all-important issue of foreign policy. Up until now, it's been thought of that the vulnerable issues for the Democrats are Obamacare, which is still polling very poorly, immigration. We have that crisis on the border. The Democrats appear completely incompetent on that issue. But now looking at this new book, now looking at these new numbers on foreign policy, is this something in the final weeks of the campaign that someone like Scott Brown or someone like the Republican in West Virginia, Shelley Moore Caputo, or in Colorado, is this a drum that they should be beating?
I think so, but I don't think Americans are reading Panetta's book or talking about whether they pulled out of Iraq too soon. But I do feel Americans feel this sense of insecurity in America. They see what's happening with Ebola, and that scares them. They have at least read or seen videos or screenshots of the ISIS beheading. So there is this feeling that they are not safe under this administration, and I think that's something that obviously coming November, candidates ought to take advantage of. of. And I want to press on, talk about what you mentioned, that there isn't any loyalty. It seems like there are so many people in the Obama administration that are coming out and sort of leaking stuff or writing a book. And I think it's because we have a president that does not take responsibility for his actions. If you look at all of the main scandals in this administration, whether it was the Obamacare website that did not work, whether it was the NSA, the president never takes responsibility. Instead, he always throws that department under the bus. And when you do that as a leader, you throw your men under the bus, of course they're going to come back and say, no, let me tell you my side of the story. So it's not surprising. And I think there are going to be a lot more books, especially from the intelligence agency, coming out after he finishes his term.
Quick question before we move on to the sweet spot. Why hasn't Kathleen Sebelius written one of these? She was the one that got thrown under the bus. Go ahead, Michelle.
I bet you it's coming, unless maybe they work out some deal where maybe she gets something later on and so she doesn't write a book. But to me, that seems like the perfect person to go get a 7-figure book deal, because she probably has some interesting stories, and I know that I would certainly read that book.
And she hasn't been gone that long.
She's got all the dirt.
I'm sure they're working on it. I'm sure they're working on a book deal. Yeah.
Give it time.
All right. Time will tell. Check out your local Barnes & Noble. Now it's time to move on to the sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
This is where we take a look at some of the lighter and softer stories making news. And since we're talking about light and soft, of course, we think of Stephen Cruiser.
In the sweet spot, a cop buys a booster seat for a mother who's struggling financially rather than give her a ticket. This happened last Friday in a small town in Michigan. Officer Ben Hall pulled over the young mom whose 5-year-old daughter was not properly secured in a car seat. The mom admitted she was wrong and had fallen on hard times. Officer Hall told her to meet him at a nearby Walmart. That's where he bought a booster seat for her daughter. Officer Hall said it was the easiest $50 he's ever spent. The woman promises to pay the good deed forward when she is back on her feet. He said the ticket would have served no real purpose there other than to punish her further financially. So he decided to do this. And, you know, in a news cycle, in what seems to be nonstop, nothing but bad news about law enforcement and the cops in the world, I really like this story because it shows the good side of law enforcement.
You know what? If the Andy Griffith Show were being made today, this is something Andy Taylor would do.
Dang straight. Barney wouldn't, because he'd get lost on the way to Walmart.
Yeah, he'd use his one bullet. All right, my sweet spot. The bacon boom was no accident. In the past decade, bacon has grown into an industry generating, get this, more than $4 billion with a B dollars in annual sales. The breakfast meat is now served all day long in various forms, from bacon-infused desserts, bacon-flavored vodka, to a bacon-flavored sexual lubricant. It's just about everywhere, literally everywhere. Put some bacon on your sausage. The bacon boom can be traced back to the pork industry's marketing offices in Iowa. That's where a man by the name of Joe Leathers, no relation to Sydney, engineered a turnaround for the underappreciated part of the pig, especially after the health craze in the 1980s. But in the 90s, fast food chains started using bacon, and it took off from there. Back in 2010, pork belly futures were 90 cents a pound. Today, it's around $5.40 a pound. All of us love bacon.
I love bacon. The craze is getting out of hand, though, with some of the products that you mentioned near the end there. Some of it's getting a little ridiculous. But I do love bacon, but of course this is Islamophobia, too.
I bet you even Michelle loves bacon.
I do love bacon, I do. But I don't think I'd have bacon vodka or all that weird stuff. I just like regular bacon.
I'm Polish. Flavored vodka is evil. I don't like it.
All right, Michelle, what do you have for us?
In the sweet spot, nobody seems to know who Joe Biden is. ABC's late night show host Jimmy Kimmel sent this crew out on the streets of Hollywood to see if people could identify the Vice President of the United States. Take a listen.
We asked Americans a very simple question, and that question was, who is Joe Biden? Okay? And here's how that went.
Who is Joe Biden?
I have no idea.
Do you want to take a guess?
A man.
Who is Joe Biden?
Joe Biden. Wasn't he our governor?
I think he's a governor or something.
Joe Biden, I don't know, terrorist group, like not terrorist.
Who is Joe Biden?
No comment.
Who is Joe Biden?
The congressman.
Congressman of where?
I don't know.
Take a guess.
Washington, D.C.
Who is Joe Biden?
Who is Joe Biden? I have no idea.
Do you know who our vice president is?
No, I don't.
The vice president was in Los Angeles to attend 2 Democratic Party fundraisers. That's interesting. People think that he's a terrorist organization. That was quite funny.
I think it's a pretty safe bet that 90% of them went to public schools in America. So that's all I'll say about that.
And, you know, if he decides to run for president, his main selling point is going to be that he has near universal name ID.
Yeah. So there you go. Oh, I love those things.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Are you surprised that Americans don't know who Joe Biden is? Put the camera on Steven Cruiser. Go ahead. Do that again.
I would have so much Biden talk today. I just need a palate cleanser. Bacon.
We want to know what you think, so be sure to leave your comments in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips for bacon lover Steven Cruiser, joining me here in Los Angeles, and Michelle Fields in the nation's capital. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.